Good morning. This is Cecil and Blues. Thank you for joining me for another Final Fantasy XIV video. Today we are looking at Dusk Vigil, the first leveling dungeon in Heavensward. Dusk Vigil is a level 51 dungeon located in Korthus, Western Highlands. In order to unlock this dungeon, you will need to do the level 51 quest For All the Nights to Come. It is located in the Convictory at the map location X17Y22. There are conflicting reports on how much of the main story you have to complete before this side quest unlocks. I found this quest at the same time the main story took me to the Convictory, but I have heard that some players have said they were able to access this quest after acquiring their etheric compass and their black chocobo whistle. I'm going to go off of my guidance of my experience, so I don't think you can access this quest until you've actually been sent to the Convictory. So just continue to process through the main quest until you find yourself standing, well, pretty much right in front of this NPC. Okay. What you want to do is speak to Weedthelo here. What kind of a name is that? Alright, well, anywho, speak with Weedthelo, and he will give you this quest, and then you'll want to travel north to the dungeon's entrance, where you will find another NPC, speak with them, and that will unlock the dungeon in the duty finder, and you will be able to queue up. Before I go into a short boss guide, I just want to say that this is a leveling dungeon, and these fights are not too tightly tuned, especially if the majority of your party has item level 120 or 130 gear. There's no need to panic if someone doesn't know the fights. Alright, Dusk Vigil is an abandoned Ishgardian fort divided into 3 areas. In the first area, you'll encounter wildlife, eventually leading to the first boss fight against the towering Oliphant. This boss has a cleave and should be faced away from the group by the tank. It has a close-range AoE called Rear, and you'll want to move out of that. It also has a room-wide AoE called the Prehistoric Trumpet that will deal moderate damage to all party members. Finally, the boss will occasionally put a targeting reticle on one party member. Shortly afterwards, it will throw a rock at them, which will stun them, and then it will use Woolly Inspiration to stun them, or it will use Rout to charge them. These attacks do significant damage and result in a long period of inactivity. If your healer is targeted by them, be aware of it and use cooldowns as necessary to survive until they are not stunned. Make sure to avoid standing in the AoE if you are not the target of these abilities, otherwise things can get out of hand. Once you're past the Oliphant, you'll have access to the fort's interior, and you'll face off against the cursed guards of Dusk Vigil. As you proceed through this area, you will find torn journal pages laying on the floor. You can read them to learn the story of Dusk Vigil if you would like, and since we're early in the expansion, I don't think anyone's going to fault you for that. If, on the other hand, you are listening to this video 6 months from now, and this is your first time in there, people might get a little frustrated when you stop to read, but you know what? You deserve it. Take the time. Learn the story if you want. Just like you should watch the cutscenes if it's your first time. Alright. Once you progress through this area, there's a few uneventful trash packs. You will come face to face with the second boss, Sir Yohelmeric. This is primarily an adds control fight. Yohelmeric has a close-range AoE called Tumulus. Tumulus? The names of abilities in this dungeon are... There's too many vowels. That's what I think. There's too many vowels. Alright. You'll want to move out of this AoE, and then he has a second AoE called Death Spiral, and you'll want to move in for this. The ground telegraphs are very distinct in this case, so it's not very confusing. If it's the normal telegraph, move out. If it's not the normal telegraph, move in. And the other thing Yohelmeric will do is cast Brain Drain, which will resurrect some of the bodies laying on the floor. All of these adds cast buffs on each other, so don't let them get out of control. It's best to just kill them as they spawn, and again, it doesn't get too out of hand. It's not too tightly tuned, the adds don't spawn too quickly. As long as you're on top of them as they pop up, you shouldn't have too much of a trouble. And once this boss's HP is reduced to 0, you will move on into the final area of the dungeon. There is one notable trash encounter in this final area, and it is against the Dusk Wolf. This mob does more damage than anything else in the dungeon, more than any other trash pack, more than any of the bosses in particular. And so it may catch both of your tank and your healer by surprise. Obviously, if you're the tank or the healer, you shouldn't be surprised because I just warned you about it. But if you're one of the DPS, you can help by stunning the Dusk Wolf. That will give the tank and the healer an opportunity to catch up on their surprise. And also, let's see, other things that can make this encounter kind of a pain in the butt. It patrols, and so if it's the tank's first time there, they may mistakenly pull it with another group, not realizing that they are two separate groups. There's a group of elementals very nearby. Also, if you are outside along the wall, there is the frostbite effect, the DOT environmental effect, which can also increase damage, making things kind of rough on the healer. Again, just be aware of it, use cooldowns as you need, stun the Dusk Wolf. It is where the majority of the damage is coming from. And assuming that you survive the Dusk Wolf, you will move on to the final encounter, which is against a griffin named Opinicus. You'll notice few piles of rubble around the arena. Most of the boss's mechanics involve them in some way. Opinicus has a cleave, so if you're the tank, don't point him at other players, and you'll also want to face him away from any of the rubble so that they do not get destroyed. The boss will occasionally cast a line AoE called Alpine Draft at a random player. Step out of the telegraph to avoid it. This attack will also destroy rubble it comes into contact with. The Griffin will also cast Free Fall on a random party member. This attack cannot be dodged. It's also a little bit tricky to tell who he targeted with it. He'll turn and face you, but he won't actually target you. So if everyone's kind of standing together, you may not know which one of you he's targeting. But in general, spread out so that other people don't get caught in the splash damage. And it probably doesn't surprise you to hear that if you are standing next to a pile of rubble, that it will get destroyed. Let's see, the last two abilities are going to involve the rubble more directly. And something you should know before I discuss those, more rubble will fall from the ceiling as the fight progresses, so if you do lose a couple of piles, don't panic. They will come back, but it will make things more challenging the more piles of rubble you get destroyed. So Opinicus' final two abilities can be mitigated by hiding behind the rubble. The first of them is called Whirling Jail, and when it's cast, it will suck everyone towards the center of the arena in 5 pulses, and then toss them into the air and stun them. This does significant damage, and especially if it hits the healer or the tank, it can cause problems because of the long stun duration. If you stand behind one of the rubble piles, you will not be sucked in, but it is also possible to avoid the final effect by continuously running to the edge of the arena, and that way you won't get thrown up into the air and stunned. But during the entire duration, you'll be, stuck constantly running. It'll be the only thing you can do. Works fine for DPS, works less fine for the healer because they're probably going to want to be casting a heal, and also the tank probably wants to be more focused on facing the boss so they don't get crit. The final ability is called the Winds of Winter, and it is a room-wide AoE. It is centered on the boss. It will destroy all the rubble piles in the room and deal moderate damage to anyone that was not hiding behind a rubble. So you can stand behind a rubble to avoid taking the damage, but the rubble piles will all be destroyed after that. It's important to kind of keep an eye out to where the new rubble piles will spawn. A couple more will spawn in right after he uses this ability, so you'll want to see where they happen to fall to make your way to them before the next Whirling Jail. During the Whirling Jail, the boss does not use his cleave ability, so it's okay to stand in front of him if you're a DPS, and if you're a tank, it's okay to face him into the rubble pile that you are currently hiding behind. And just keep up, I don't know, everything in this fight. There's a lot of mechanics going on, but it's not brutal, right? Like the damage done isn't so much that if you make a mistake, that's the end. So, in general, you should be okay. This is the last boss. Once you've killed it, the dungeon is over, and you can re-queue if you want, or you can go on with your questing. The reward for completing the quest associated with this dungeon for the first time is an etheric current, so you will need to do this if you want to fly in the zone. I will continue to put out more guides for these dungeons as I experience them. You may have noticed I'm a little bit spacey. Hey, I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy over the last 24 to... well... It's been more than 24 hours, that's for sure. Anyone got a watch? Alright, well, have a great day, and I hope you are enjoying Early Access.